Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate y'all being here for the B Corp Certification Getting Started webinar. Um, I'm Max Hayes. I'm a growth manager with B Lab US and Canada. I use pronouns he, him, and I'm joining y'all from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on the homeland of the Lenni Lenape people. So, a little bit of housekeeping before I introduce the team who'll be helping me run the webinar today. There is a live caption option available to you if you need it, but you'll need to manually enable it on your end. We also invite your questions on the content throughout the webinar, but we just ask that you drop them in the Q&A box instead of the chat. And we hope to answer as many live as we can today, but any that we don't get to, we'll be sure to send answers in the follow-up email for this event. And also, we're hoping to save some time at the end of our session today to answer any questions live. We may also drop a few links in the chat throughout, but everything that we share will also be hyperlinked in the slides, which will be sent out in the follow-up email, along with a recording of this event. And we encourage y'all to take a quick moment to use the chat to introduce yourselves, connect with one another. Just make sure that your chat is set to everyone and not just the event hosts. So I'm joined today by my colleague Stacy, and Stacy and I both help B Corps on their certification journey, how to make the business case, how to meet the standards, and how to be successful in the audit. And Stacy will be helping me out with the chat and the Q&A today. And then I'm also joined by my colleague Ron, who is helping out behind the scenes with our tech. And so here is our agenda for the day. We're going to start by really understanding what is the B Impact platform, what can it do for you. We'll spend some time going through the foundational requirements. These are really core to confirming your company's eligibility and understanding what you'll be required to do to become a certified B Corp. And then we'll also walk through how to set up your account and see really clearly what are the exact requirements that need to get met in order for your business to certify and join this community. We'll also talk a little bit about management best practices, how to build a successful team to support your B Corp journey. And then we'll go over some resources and tools that you can find and access to support you on your journey. And then we will also have some time, hopefully at the end, for closing and next steps, as well as Q&A. So that is where we will be spending our time today. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Hopefully, if y'all are here, you already know what B Corp certification is, and you're trying to pursue certification, excited about joining this movement of businesses using their influence and power as a force for good. But just a little bit of context, B Lab was founded in 2006 and is the nonprofit behind B Corp certification. So we are really the shepherds of this movement. We set the standards, the policies, and the tools to help businesses act responsibly. And our vision here at B Lab is to create an inclusive, equitable, and regenerative economic system for all people and the planet. And so over the past 20 years, the B Corp movement has been growing rapidly, and I'm proud to say that today the movement is made up of over 10,000 B Corps operating across the globe. And these 10,000 B Corps actually represent more than 1 million workers across the world. So the B Corp movement is really hitting a critical stage, and we recently launched a new set of our standards. This is the 7th version of our standards, the largest update we've had to our movement since its inception. So we're really excited for this next evolution of B Corp and for what these new standards mean for responsible business. So now that we are grounded again, who is B Lab? What is certification? Where is this movement grown and headed? Now I want to turn our attention to the B Impact platform as well as our standards, which are really our flagship product. So the B Impact platform is our free tool where we have hundreds of thousands of users who are using this platform to measure and manage their business's impact. And then we have the B Lab standards, which is a product created by our team here at B Lab to basically set that bar for what does it mean to be a responsible and impactful business. And so, like I mentioned, we're constantly evolving our standards to make sure that they're best in class and keeping up with the evolving regulatory landscape. And we're currently on the 7th version of our standards. So when you log in, you'll see that the B Impact platform is a comprehensive tool. It covers a lot. So in the new standards, we have 7 impact topics that we'll be measuring your business's impact against. But you can also see the B Impact assessment is really a little bit of like a project management tool, a place to store your information and get a holistic overview of your company's performance and where you stand in relation to the B Corp standards. We also have some other tools in there like our SDG Action Manager to help you see where your business lines up against those standards. And you can even access the old B Corp standards as well if you're interested in those. And so the B Impact platform is really that blueprint, that roadmap to help businesses improve their impact and address their integrity. And so, again, it's really important to acknowledge that B Corp certification is different from other certifications out there on the market. We are not a product level certification, we are a company level certification. So, we don't certify the final products, we certify the entire company. So, we're going to look at everything from the way you're structured to how you treat your employees, as well as supply chain due diligence, as well as that final product you might be selling. It's also important to note that with our new standards, we've fully transitioned to third-party assurance. So once you are confident that you're meeting the B Corp standards, you have your evidence, and you're ready to be reviewed, you'll actually be working with a third party, which is considered best in class for certification bodies like ours. And then also something that's changed with the new standards is we've moved away from our old point-based system. So now all companies will need to meet specific requirements across 7 impact topics in order to become certified. And those requirements are tailored to your company's size, the sector you operate in, as well as your location. So again, there is standards tailored to your specific business and the impact that it's having. Also, just like in the past too, the B Corp standards are really here to try to help drive home this concept of continuous improvement. And with the new standards, we've actually baked that into the recertification process. And so as companies maintain their B Corp status, you'll actually need to meet additional requirements throughout a 5-year window to keep your business in compliance with our standards and really embrace that spirit of continuous improvement. And so, like I mentioned, we have 7 impact topics now. So, the first one here is our foundational requirements. That's not one of our impact topics, and this is what we'll be spending the next few minutes talking about. But then the other 7 are really how we're measuring your business's impact. So, we'll be looking at taking action on the climate crisis, how your business is structured from a governance perspective, how you're interacting with natural resources, commitment to respecting human rights, looking at how your labor practices are and treating employees. We'll be looking at how you're using your business to engage in collective action and really advocate for the change that we all want to see in the world. And then lastly, we'll be looking at justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and really building that community in that workplace where folks can thrive and show up as their whole selves. So again, when I get into the B Impact assessment, I'll do a live demo. We'll look at my test account, and I can show you all how to find the standards related to each of these topics specific to your business. But before we get into the impact topics, I want to make sure we spend some time here talking about the foundational requirements, because these are really critical to understand and have a grasp of if you're committed to becoming a B Corp and wanting to get clarity on what it will actually take for your business to become a B Corp. And so our foundational requirements are really confirming the eligibility, because while we certify companies of all shapes, sizes, and industries, there are certain industries that we don't actually certify businesses in. So our first foundational requirement here, which we call FR1, is that the company meets our eligibility requirements. So we'll be talking about what does that mean in just a moment. FR2 is speaking to the legal requirement for B Corp certification. So this is a requirement that has been a core requirement for our movement since its inception in 2006. And what our legal requirement is really all about is pushing back against shareholder capitalism and the idea of profit maximization as the only metric of success in a business. So, in order to become a B Corp, you actually need to expand your company's fiduciary duties, which allows the directors or the leaders of your business to legally do more than just consider profit. And so, if you're registered as a corporation in the United States or some territories abroad, it's likely that meeting this requirement would mean converting to a benefit corporation. But there are other pathways depending on your company's incorporation state or territory, as well as the type of entity that you're registered as. So we'll dive a little bit more into that and the resources available to you. And then lastly, we have our risk profile. So while there are certain industries that we don't certify companies in, there are also certain behaviors that may require additional requirements to be met or transparency that needs to be disclosed to your stakeholders, depending on what's happened in your business or the clients that you work with. So we'll also make sure to touch on that in more detail. But first, I want to go back to the eligibility requirements and really being like getting clear on how do we know, is my business even eligible for B Corp certification? So really, these are the 5 requirements that make up FR1 or that eligibility piece. And so the first one is that the company meets the entity qualifications to become a B Corp. I'll show you all what this looks like in setup, but what this is really saying is we don't certify nonprofits, we don't certify government entities, and we only certify for-profit businesses that operate in a competitive market. So this requirement is really making sure that you're the right type of business to get value from B Corp certification. Again, our B Impact platform is free and available to all. So if you're a nonprofit, if you have partners who could find value in our standards, they're more than welcome to use the platform. They just won't be able to pursue certification. The next requirement is really looking at those industries that your company might operate in. So we do have a handful of industries in which we don't certify companies if they directly operate in those. And we can see those in the B Impact platform when we dive in deeper, but those are things like the defense industry, tobacco, fossil fuels, and basically industries that really operate against B Lab's theory of change of creating that regenerative, inclusive, sustainable economic system. Another requirement here is about complying with your local and national laws. That's a pretty basic one. Wanting to make sure that companies are sharing complete and accurate information with us. So, as an auditing company, you will be needing to provide a lot of data and evidence to back up the claims that you're making. And so, it's really important that we have an understanding that the information you're providing to us is accurate. And then also the last piece, a big part of B Corp certification is also embracing that culture of transparency. No company is perfect. We know that, but it's all about informing your stakeholders so that they can make informed decisions and aligned with their values and ethics. All of this information can be found in more detail in our Knowledge Hub, which is linked here, and I'll be sure to demo in just a moment. But now let's move on to diving a little bit deeper into the legal requirement. So, like I mentioned, this really is the backbone of the B Corp movement, something we've been doing for 20 years. B Lab was actually one of the early champions of benefit corporation status, which is actually a legal status or a corporate structure that you can register for when incorporating your business. And so it's really important to understand what is your company's exact legal requirements, and completing the setup process in the platform will actually show you exactly which entities will need to make the legal change. Because in the event you have a couple parent companies or subsidiaries, there may be multiple entities that need to make the necessary legal changes to be in compliance with this requirement. So we've created a great tool, the B Corp legal requirement tool. So after you finish setup, the system will tell you exactly which entities need to meet legal, and then you can use this tool to understand how can this entity actually satisfy this requirement. We also have recorded some great webinars in the past, and we've linked the recordings here depending on your company's type. So if you're an LLC, a corporation in the US, or a Canadian corporation. Um, and so again, if you do have specific questions about the legal requirement, definitely reach out to us. We're happy to help. This can be a complicated thing to navigate, and it's a really big hurdle for companies because it is not a small thing to rechange your company's organizational structure, get buy-in from your investors or shareholders. So we understand that this is not a topic we take lightly, but it's really important that you have clarity on your company's ability to meet this requirement because it is a core requirement for certification. So then the last piece of the foundational requirements is creating this risk profile. And so the risk profile is essentially 14 questions or topics relating to the following categories of your employees, your product and operations, and your reputation. And so, as you can see in the screenshot here, highlighted is the risk profile. Once you click on that, you'll get into the 14 questions. If you were to select yes to any of those, you may be required to meet additional requirements. And it's also important to note in that vein of embracing the culture of transparency, a summary of your risk profile will be displayed on your public B Corp profile. So once your company is certified, all certified B corporations have a public profile on the B Corp directory so that all their stakeholders can understand when they got certified, where their website is, where they're located, and what additional risk might have been identified during the audit. And so risk could be things like product recalls, ongoing litigations or lawsuits, employee injuries, things like that. So we can skim through those so we can see what those look like in more detail when we get to the live demo. But just wanted to make sure to call out for folks that, the foundational requirements are really important to understanding before spending more time doing that benchmarking piece, especially if your business is committed to getting certified and wanting to go down that road. So once you complete setup, we highly recommend you go next to this foundational requirements tab and complete these three tasks before diving any deeper into the B Corp standards. Okay, so now that we've covered the foundational requirements, let's talk about the actual journey, how to get started in the platform, what happens once you've created an account and logged in. It's likely that y'all have already had accounts created, or maybe you've had one for a long time and things have changed and look different. So you're here to get a better understanding of how to navigate and leverage our new platform. We're really excited about the changes that have come. We've really been trying to improve the platform to be more user friendly, to be more valuable, to help your business navigate our standards, and really kind of be a helpful tool as you're benchmarking and trying to meet your company's unique certification requirements. So first off, I just wanted to mention that we have added multi-factor authentication to our login platform. So if you haven't logged in a while, you'll likely see some new prompts in order to get access to the B Corp assessment. So I've linked a knowledge base article here, which will walk you through exactly how to work through that multi-factor authentication if you're having any issues. And then also, if you forgot your password, you can always reset it with us right there through that forgot password link. So another thing I wanted to make sure to call out is that B Corp certification as a company level certification is very complex. And so we definitely recommend that you invite other colleagues or relevant stakeholders to join you on this journey of getting certified. And the easiest way to do that is to go ahead and just add them to the profile once you create it. And so this slide here is really just showing you exactly how to access this. Once you log in, you'll see your initials up in the top right-hand corner. You'll go ahead and click that, go to manage account, and then you can hit team members and add team members. You can also add team members of different like permissions. So maybe you don't want folks to be able to change some of the basic information, but you want them to be able to help you in navigating the standards. You can assign certain roles to different users. And so I've linked another knowledge base article here, which will walk you through exactly how to do that. But again, highly recommend you find some other folks to support you on this journey because we will be looking at all sorts of impacts of your business. And so having different department heads or a few different team members from across the organization not only helps break down silos and build team camaraderie, but really will help you navigating the standards and having a fun and successful B Corp journey. So once you've done that, you've created your account, you've logged in, you've added your team members. The next thing you're going to want to do is complete assessment setup. This might be required like right when you log in. So if you haven't had a chance to add team members yet and it's bringing you right to setup, complete that first and then add your team members after. But you may still need some team member support to complete setup. And so setup is essentially four different tasks that we are going to ask you to do to ensure that your company is seeing the requirements that are specific to your business because of your org structure, where you're located, the industry you operate in, and the size of your business. Again, we have a really comprehensive guide on the knowledge base, the step-by-step guide to completing setup. So again, we'll walk through the setup tasks in more detail just here in a moment, but also want to make sure folks know where to find these resources later in case you want to navigate this on your own. So let's dive in a little bit more into what are the four tasks that make up setup. So the very first task is going to be about gathering your company documents. In order to complete setup in one go, it'll be important that you have a couple documents on hand. So first up, you're going to want to have your articles of incorporation, um, because we need to know what kind of entity are you and what state or territory are you incorporated in. The next piece we'll need to know is the organizational chart. So this will be really important in understanding that legal requirement, which entities need to be captured in your assessment because we are a company level certification. So it may be that your parent company, your subsidiaries, maybe even sister companies need to be captured and included in your B Corp certification. So having an org chart will make it really helpful to complete assessment setup. You'll also need a P&L statement because we'll be asking some information about revenue, which is how we determine a company's size, as well as this last piece here around an employee roster or HR records, because we'll need to know how many employees you have and what types of employees. Are they full-time, part-time, temporary? Are they interns? Are they independent contractors? So this stage here is really just to make sure that you have the documents at hand to be successful in setup. Again, we know every company is different. So if your company is small or you just don't have these things, just check that you do so that you can keep moving through this stage of setup. So diving a little bit deeper into the second stage, we'll be looking at your company's organizational type. So this kind of goes back to that preliminary eligibility question of making sure you're not a nonprofit, a company with charitable status, and that you're operating in a competitive market. We also only certify companies that have had 12 months of business operations or more. So if your company is a startup or just beginning, you may not qualify for B Corp certification right off the bat. And that's really because we need a full year's worth of operational data to verify a company's impact. So going through this will really kind of be your preliminary eligibility and making sure that based on your company's structure and how long you've been operating, that you can continue on the B Corp journey. So this next one here, task three is related to that organizational chart. So here we'll be looking at exactly how are you structured? Are you independently owned? Do you have a parent company? Are you publicly traded? We certify companies of all different structures and types. It's just that the requirements for your business may become more complicated depending on how many entities you have. So we have, I think, a little over 24 publicly traded B Corps. We have sole proprietorships. We have companies of all shapes and sizes. But again, it'll be really important that you enter this information accurately so that we can give you the most accurate requirements for your company. It's also possible that as you're filling this out, the system may not be able to provide you with an automatic determination of your company's scope. So if that happens, the system will flag you and say, hey, we've let B Lab know that you're going to need a human review. So if that were to happen, you'll basically get stuck at this stage of the review process, and somebody will reach out to you within about 2 to 3 weeks to take you through a scoping exercise. And so this is where you're going to work with an analyst like me or Stacy to take you through an assessment of your company's organizational structure to understand exactly which entities need to be included in your B Corp profile, as well as which entities need to meet the legal requirement. So again, if you're motivated to become a B Corp, getting clarity on this is really essential to ensuring that you don't have any issues later on in your B Corp journey. And again, we have some great knowledge base articles on this topic if you are looking for more information. And again, you can always reach out to us with any specific questions. And then the last part of assessment setup is what we call customizing your assessment. So, like I mentioned, our standards or our requirements will be tailored to your company's size and sector. And so, the way that we determine a company's size is based on two variables: your annual revenue from the last recently completed fiscal year or your employee headcount. And as you can see from this table here, these are the different size tracks we have, all the way from companies without workers. So that's likely if you're just a business made up of founders or a sole proprietorship, all the way up to extra, extra large companies who have more than 10,000 employees or over $1.5 billion in annual revenue. It's important to note that your size track is actually determined by whichever of the two is smaller, either your employee count or your revenue. So, for example, if your company has 15 employees, but you're making 15 million in annual revenue, you would actually still be on the small size track. The other way that we tailor a company's standards is based on the industry that they're operating in. So as you can see here, we are going to ask you very specific questions about how your company generates revenue so that we can better determine which sector best represents your business. So we'll be asking you things about, do you produce your own products or through like company-owned manufacturing plants, or is it outsourced to third parties? Do you have a physical footprint for your business, or are you just an office with computers? So again, making sure you answer this section accurately will be really important in ensuring that you see the standards tailored to your business. There are also two other fields that you'll fill out, your industry category and your industry. These are self-selected to help us better understand what kind of business that you are. And again, we have another knowledge base article here to really help you understand how to address these questions and answer it accurately. And so once you've completed those four tasks, which make up the setup experience, you'll notice a little green box at the bottom or top of your screen. show up, and that basically says submit setup. It's really important that you hit that submit button because that basically tells the system that, hey, we've answered all the information accurately. We are ready to go. Once you hit submit setup, it will actually generate an assessment for you based on that information. So it will tailor the standards you see in the platform to the information you've provided in setup. So again, this is why completing setup is so important and why we're so excited y'all are here on this webinar today to help make sure that you get it set up right from the get-go so that the rest of your B Corp journey is smooth sailing. So again, once you finish setup, you'll also always be able to go back and see exactly what your company's scope is. So which entities need to meet the legal requirement, as well as which size you are, industry you've been assigned, all of that. It's also important to note that the B Corp journey can take several months of benchmarking, meeting those requirements before you're ready to say, hey, B Lab, we want to go work with an auditor. We're ready for audit. So if your company does change throughout the period that you're working on the assessment, maybe your employee headcount changes, you acquire another business, you can always go back and update your scoping information and resubmit it to let us know what's changed. It's also important to note that the scoping information you see is only valid for 12 months. So let's say after this webinar, you go in, you finish setup, the information you provide will only be valid for 12 months. So if you're still working on benchmarking and meeting those requirements into, let's say, April of next year, you will need to recomplete setup again before you can go work with an auditor. So now we're going to get more into navigating the B Impact platform. I have some slides here demoing how to do certain things, but I think it'd be better if I just start sharing my test account so we can go through this together. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick and then switch over to a different screen so we can look at my test account and go through some of this together. Perfect. Okay, so here we are in my test account now. As you can see, when you get into the home page, the system will already kind of flag you to do what you need to do next. Maybe it's complete setup, maybe it's to work on your foundational requirements. But I also just want to walk you all through the features here on the left-hand side. So when you hit the assessment, what we've been talking about so far has really been this setup tab. So completing setup here, you can see your progress bar as you work through it and the 4 tasks that we just covered. And then once you do complete it, there will be this tab here that shows up called Scope. And so this is really showing you again exactly which entities need to make the legal change or be included in your assessment, as well as what is your company's specific size category. So for my test account, I'm a small business with a minor environmental footprint, meaning 90% or more of my company's revenue does not involve selling a physical product. And then for this one, I'm an architecture firm. And you can see here that I was the one who submitted this setup, when it was submitted, and when it's valid till. So once you've done setup, the next thing you want to do is add those team members, like I mentioned up here in the Manage Account tab, and then go into your foundational requirements. So here we can see the exact industries and practices that would mean you're not eligible for B Corp certification at this time. So here's a list of the industries. If your company is earning more than 1% of its revenue from direct involvement with any of these industries, you wouldn't able to be certified at this time. So it's important to note that we'll be looking at the industry you operate in, some of the practices you have, as well as some of the clients that you work with. We also talked about the legal requirement, so you can see that here in more detail. And then the last piece is this risk profile. So these were the 14 questions that if you answer yes to any of them, you may have additional requirements and you'll need to disclose this on your public profile. So this could be things like the use of artificial intelligence, pending lawsuits, using dangerous or hazardous chemicals, things like that. So it's really important to go through this as well to really understand what are your company's exact requirements for certification. So once you've completed setup and the foundational requirements, then you'll want to navigate to your dashboard. This is really where you'll be spending a good chunk of your time after you get your account set up. And this is really where you'll be benchmarking against those standards to be like, is my business doing what it needs to do in order to become a B Corp? Are we aligned with the B Corp standards? So we can see for my business, a small Architecture firm, I have 67 sub requirements that need to be met. And so these are the exact requirements tailored to my business that I'll need to meet. You can filter by specific impact topics. So, for example, it might be helpful to have certain folks work on certain topics. Maybe you're an HR professional and you want to start with the fair work section because that's what you're most familiar with. You can go ahead and filter right to the fair work requirements. You can click in to see what the exact requirement is. So this is Fair Work 1.1, and the requirement is that all employees have a contract or an offer letter that's meeting the following criteria. So we can see exactly what needs to be included in the offer letter in order to be in compliance with this requirement. Maybe I'm confused about what's going on. I want some more information. How are some of these terms being defined? You can access more information here in the more detailed section to get additional insight. You can even share your feedback with us directly about this requirement if you have certain questions. And we also have linked over here on the right side supplementary resources like recommendations or tools like maybe templates, other credible resources to look into, as well as terms and definitions, how we're defining things referenced in these standards so you can get really clear on exactly what's required of you. All right, so I've read through this. I, as the HR manager, have access to our offer letter template. I look at it, I confirm that the offer letter includes all of these requirements. What I'll want to do next is assign myself to this requirement, mark it as done. But the last thing you'll want to do is to upload evidence. So you can actually attach evidence to each of the sub requirements here, either directly from your computer by selecting a file and uploading it, or through the documentation hub, which I'll show y'all in just a moment. It's really important that in order to submit your assessment for audit, that you have documentation uploaded for all sub requirements that apply to your business. So you may see some sub requirements that don't apply to your business. You can indicate that in the platform. But again, most of the requirements that you're seeing will be tailored to your specific business. And it's important that you'll need to attach evidence for each sub requirement because once you submit for audit, the auditors are going to need to see that to confirm that you're in compliance with what the standard requires. Also, at the very bottom here, you can leave yourself comments. Maybe you want to leave a note that I have the offer letter. It's missing bullet, let's see, bullet 3 here, the nature of the place of the work. So you can leave yourself notes here to kind of help use the platform as a bit of a project management tool. And you can also assign due dates to help you keep yourself on track, as well as different folks. So like I mentioned, once you add a few different team members, maybe you want to assign those team members to specific sections, and then host a check-in meeting in a month to see how folks are doing as they're benchmarking against that information. So I also mentioned the documentation hub. So this is another really powerful place to store all the data that you're gathering in one safe place, which is the B Impact platform. So let's say you are the HR manager, you have the employee handbook at hand, and you could upload the employee handbook right here into the documentation hub. It's likely that the information in that handbook can be applied as the piece of evidence for multiple different sub requirements. So what you could do is upload the handbook here. Then you could go back into the assessment itself. Let's say we want to go back to the fair work section again. And what we can do is click back in here, and I could upload evidence directly from the documentation hub. So let's see, I only have one piece in, but let's assume this was the one I was looking for. I could click here and just indicate what page it's on. So on page 24, you can see a template of an offer letter that includes all the criteria specified here, and you can upload it right there. So again, for folks who've been using the B Impact platform for a while, in the past, you needed to upload evidence for each question individually. So this documentation hub is a great way to reduce some of that reporting burden and make sure that if you have one comprehensive resource with your policies, your practices, even if it's a Google Drive file, with long pages of all your policies grouped together, you can just upload that once and indicate what page the auditor will need to look at in order to verify that impact. So again, don't be afraid to use the documentation hub and the B Impact platform as your sandbox as you're gathering this data, throwing it all in there, leaving yourself notes, assigning team members, due dates. Because again, as you can see, The impact topics are going to cover a lot of different aspects of your business. So it'll be really important that you keep your data organized here and know how you're progressing against the standards. So as you start assigning your team or yourself individual topics you're working through, you'll start to see your progress here on the dashboard page. So you can see which ones you've marked as in progress. So maybe you're like, oh, we've started this, but we haven't fully finalized it yet, versus the ones where you're like, yep, ready to go. I have evidence uploaded, as well as ones where you're like, hey, this is not applicable. Or you can also request a variance. So this might be like, hey, in my region or my territory, it's actually not legal for us to collect this information, or we have universal health care, so we don't need to provide this specific evidence. So if you have something like that, you can request a variance to the specific standard. Okay, so that is pretty much all I wanted to make sure that we covered here in the B impact assessment itself. I'll also go back to this toolbar here on the left to highlight a few other features. So we've gone through pretty much all of these here, the dashboard, assessment setup, foundational requirements. You can also access specific requirements here through the impact topic, which is just kind of a different view of the dashboard. And then you can also go to the history to see if you had previous versions of your certification on the old standards. This certification tab is more about when you're ready to hit submit. So we'll have further webinars coming out later this year to talk about audit readiness and how to know if you're ready to submit and what does it take to submit your assessment. So we won't be covering that in today's webinar. And then, excuse me, and then the documentation hub, which we were just talking about. Lastly, if you are still interested in our old standards or our other tools, here's where you can find version 1.6 of the assessment, as well as our SDG Action Manager. So again, if you've been working with our platform for a while, the data you entered is not gone. It still lives here. It's just that you will no longer be able to certify on these standards anymore. The only standards that we're certifying companies on at this point in time is the new standards, which we've been talking about up to this point. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen again and switch back. Okay, great. So we are covering a lot. Again, what I just showed y'all in that demo, a lot of these slides are just covering some of what we've talked about today, how to upload evidence, where to find more information. We also have a comprehensive demo video if you want to see somebody else go through this in more detail than we covered today. And then now I want to spend a little bit of time of talking about certification management and best practices. This certification is a lot. As a company level certification, you've heard me say it. We're going to look at a lot of different parts of your business. And so it's really important to set yourself up for success. And we have a couple tips and recommendations on how to increase your company's likelihood of achieving certification. So first off, it'll be really important that you assign a main beekeeper or a project manager. And so that likely would be you if you're here on this call, or really somebody who's going to help focus on keeping the project moving. Ideally, we would like to see companies move through this process in a 12-month window from creating an account to submitting for audit. Obviously, every company's journey is different. It may take you longer, it may take you shorter, depending on your company and situation. We know that not every company has full teams they can dedicate. It might just be you trying to work through this. And so we're here to support you on that journey, but we want to make sure you're setting realistic expectations for yourself. But we do see that companies who have a single point of contact, a project manager who's setting deadlines, checking in with folks, and moving towards that goal of submission are more likely to move through within that 12-month window. It's also important, like you've heard me say, to have staff from different departments or areas of the business involved in this project, especially if their roles are really core to specific impact topics and you might be less familiar with it, can really help you move through the assessment at a more rapid pace. So this is also a really great way, like I mentioned, to help break down silos within your organization, create team bonding, and connect folks who may not otherwise get a chance to work together. So if you are an ESG professional, this could be a great opportunity to connect with somebody from leadership, somebody from finance, somebody from product and operations. It's also really important that you have somebody from the executive team involved because there are some really high level changes that need to be made, like we mentioned around the legal requirement, disclosure of certain information. So we really recommend that you build a B team with folks from different departments, as well as somebody from the executive team. We also see that it's really helpful to schedule monthly or quarterly meetings to help keep that progress going, drum up ideas, and set goals. So maybe you, as the beekeeper, you do setup, you do the foundational requirements, you do an initial assessment of what is your company already in compliance with. But then you're like, great, there are 30 sub requirements we're not fully meeting. That's a great time to set up a team meeting with your B team and walk through those requirements, prioritize ones that align with your current annual strategy or objectives, and then figure out how are you going to close that gap, allocate that budget, and get there so that you can submit for audit and join the B Corp community. So, in order of like project management goals, sometimes it's helpful to look at this in terms of a timeline. So, like I mentioned, we're really hoping folks to move through this journey in this 12-month window. So, if we were to think about it like that, there are really four quarterly milestones that we want folks going through. So, if you're here today in March, you're ready, we're committed, we want to join the movement, we want to become a B Corp. The first thing to do is a lot of what we've been talking about today. So, setting up your account well, drafting out a project roadmap, and hosting that kickoff meeting with your B team. Once you've started doing that, the next quarter you'd want to get focused on what are my company's actual requirements? How can I understand them? And then the next part would be benchmarking against them. Are we already meeting them? Are there ones we're not meeting? Once you've identified what you're not meeting, that can be a great place to start engaging the wider team, getting creative ideas, figuring out what's a priority for your business, and doing some action planning on how are we going to close these gaps so that we can actually submit for audit and obtain B Corp certification. Then we get into the next 6 months of the B Corp journey, which, like I mentioned, we'll be covering in further webinars later on this year. But then we'll get a little more focused on how do we gather the right documentation? How do we ensure that the information we've provided is accurate? And how do we prepare for the audit and the capacity it'll take to go through that audit process? And then the last part is actually submitting for audit. So you'll need to sign the B Corp agreement. You'll need to go through a few more tasks to actually submit your assessment for audit. And then you're also going to want to understand what happens during the audit and what do I do if it turns out I'm not in compliance with some of the standards that I thought I was in compliance with. So again, we'll have tons of resources that are already available on the Knowledge Hub to help you understand that, but we'll also have other webinars and live offerings to work through all of this together. And then again, you can always reach out to us at B Lab to help you. So now I want to go through some of those resources and tools. Y'all have heard me say it a lot, but our Knowledge Hub is a really powerful one. Within our Knowledge Hub, you'll find this series called our Impact Collabs. Actually, I don't know if this one is hosted in the Knowledge Hub, but you can access it here. These are our Impact Collabs. And so these are a series of webinar offerings that our team hosted last year where we went through each of the impact topics, a really deep dive into what are the standards, what's required of your business. We heard from B Corps and consultants on how to meet some of these requirements and what's the intention of them. So if you're really just trying to wrap your head around these new standards and topics, highly recommend digging into some of these impact collabs. And then if you're looking for more specific information on how do I do setup, how do I know if I'm ready to submit, that Knowledge Hub is really a great place to spend some time digging around. We've recently updated it so it's a lot more efficient to navigate through. So for y'all who are maybe like, hey, I went to Max's webinar. He talked a lot about setup. I know this is important. I need to go back and review this. You can go to that tab there called Becoming a B Corp, hit setup, and see all the articles related to that. We've also pulled together a one-pager, which is on the left side of the screen here, which covers all of the resources available on the impact topics. So we have some self-paced live courses that you can do. We have Knowledge Hub articles. We have the immersion course. So there's so much information that we've created about each of these topics so that you can dive in and learn more about what is most important or interesting or confusing to you and your business. And then lastly, like I mentioned, you can always reach out to us if you need some support, you're feeling stuck or lost, or you want to schedule some time to talk to somebody like me or Stacy. You can always do that by going to the Knowledge Hub and submitting a ticket, which is in the top right-hand corner of the platform once you log in. or you can email certify@bcorporation.net. Whether you log a ticket or email us, both of those go to the same contact here at B Lab, and they'll make sure that you get connected to the right folks in about a week or so. So give us a little time after you submit a ticket. We are a small but mighty team, but we are definitely here monitoring your questions and making sure you're getting the information that you need. Okay, covered a lot. Now I want to cover something exciting. We have the B Lab Champions Retreat coming up in April of next month. So, for folks who don't know, Champions Retreat is our flagship conference hosted by B Lab, where we invite B Corps, academics, aspiring B Corps, nonprofit partners from all over the US and Canada to come join us. We've even had folks come from abroad. And so this year we'll be hosting our Champions Retreat in Milwaukee, Wisconsin from April 21st to the 23rd. This really is the flagship place where B Corps and mission aligned organizations are coming together to share best practices, to build community, and better understand how we support each other and this growing movement of using business as a force for good. So we are still have tickets for sale if you're interested. If you're like, hey, I think I want to become a B Corp. I'd love to know what it means. This is really one of the best places to get access to a huge number of B Corps and really understand what does it mean to be part of the B Corp community. So if you're still trying to figure out what is certification? What would it mean for my business? What is this B Corp community all about? This event is really one of the best places to go. I've been to three champions retreats at my time at B Lab, and I have to say these conferences are unlike any other conference I've ever been to. I always leave feeling rejuvenated, excited, and hopeful for the future. So if you're feeling like you could use a little bit of pouring into your cup, community, and hope, the Champions Retreat is another great conference to really help give you some of that. So I wanted to make sure to call that out for folks here today. All right, so it looks like we're doing pretty good on time. Before we move on to the live Q&A, I would love to ask everyone a quick poll. So we're going to take a moment to get that poll up. But the question is essentially, after today's session, do you feel more prepared to progress in your certification journey as a result of this session? You can rank that on a 1 to 10. Again, we just want to hear where you're at, making sure this content is meeting folks where they are. We really appreciate your feedback. We'll also be sending out a short survey after this webinar as well with a little more opportunity to provide more context. So if you do have very specific feedback, things you were hoping to hear that weren't mentioned, telling me I talk too fast, I know that I'm working on that. I'm sorry, y'all. But again, if you have that feedback, we really appreciate it. So definitely keep an eye out for the survey in the follow-up email. We always are appreciative of folks letting us know their thoughts and what they need from these kinds of live sessions. All right, perfect. It looks like we got almost everyone in, so thank y'all so much for answering that poll. We'll give it just one more second for folks. And then while we were waiting for folks to finish answering, we're getting ready to move over to the live Q&A. So if you do have questions still, definitely let us know. All right, so let's move over to our Q&A portion. I will stop sharing my screen and I will kick it over to Stacy to let me know if there are any questions that would be helpful to voice over. And then I'm also going to see if we can turn on the opportunity for folks to raise their hand so they can come off if they would like to share their question live with us.
I can start with the first one, and thank you so much, Max. I actually really appreciate your fast pace because I think it keeps me energized throughout the hour and learning. I was able to answer a few questions, but one that I want to elevate is from Tabitha around other considerations for fully remote companies, or would this be one of the instances where equity mechanism or variance would need to be um, sought out?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tabitha. So we do have standards tailored to fully remote businesses. So if you are a fully remote business, you're not selling a physical product, you have no physical footprint, you'll likely be entered onto the minor environmental impact sector, which is basically acknowledging that your business really has no environmental footprint or impact. So we do have standards tailored to your unique business. There may be specific questions that come up, for example, around monitoring your energy, water, and waste. So let's say you don't own your building, maybe you're leasing a space or you're fully remote, all of your staff are dispersed and work from home. In that case, you can reach out to say, request a variance and say, hey, our business actually does not have a physical footprint. We are unable to measure our energy, water, and waste use. So that is a situation where, again, the standards will be tailored to your business, acknowledging that you don't have a factory, you don't have hazardous chemicals you need to monitor, but you may be able to monitor your energy, water, and waste. And so in your case, as a fully remote organization, you would want to request a variance saying, hey, we're actually 100% remote. We have no offices. We're unable to monitor and provide that information. And again, we just want to see some evidence of that. So it might look like just a statement saying we have no leased office space. The only legal entity we have is our LLC or corporation, and no offices. And again, the B Corp standards are really also supposed to be like a guide to think about how to monitor your business's impact. So there may be questions around, do you provide your employees with a list of sustainable vendors or energy efficient equipment that they can provide? So there may be some other ways the standards would encourage you to look into the potential impact, positive impact you could have as a fully remote organization. Yeah, Tabitha, you're welcome.
I wanted to elevate just some answers around accessibility to all the wonderful tools and standards that Max has been taking us through today. So, both the account with B Impact as well as all the resources within the account, the standards, the assessment, are all free. And you do not need to commit to certification to be able to use those tools. The certification piece is the only paid component because we work with a third-party assurance company, as Max mentioned, to validate your impact. As well as that includes membership fees that a company would be paying annually. And then let me see if there are any. Um, And I guess the other question that I wanted to elevate is from Emily around how can a company seek out some additional support when pursuing the PBC setup or the legal amendment setup? Are there any services that BLab provides, or are there any resources that we can share that could be really helpful?
And Stacey, that was specific to the legal requirement and setup.
Yeah, specific to the legal requirement. So Emily's company is setting up as a Delaware PBC right now.
Awesome. So one thing I would say is that B-Lab does not provide legal advice or legal services. So while we can provide guidance on how to be in compliance with those standards, it's really important that you get your own legal counsel or support. I will say that we do have a couple B Corp certified law firms who are well versed in this conversion. So I'm going to drop the link to the B Corp directory here, but if you look for your specific state or even just search law firms in the US or Canada, depending on where you're based, you can find certified B Corp law firms who have gone through this themselves. So that's a great way to find legal partners who can help you navigate this. If you're really struggling to still find folks, I would recommend reaching out to certify at bcorporation.net. We can also share a few of the companies that we do know have expertise in helping folks commit to the legal requirement. There is also a whole suite of trained B Corp consultants who can help you navigate this entire process. Again, all of their fees are like self-designated, but what we at B Lab have done is essentially taken these consultants through a training course to ensure that they have a solid understanding of our standards, requirements, and processes. So if your company is like, hey, we really want to do this, we don't have the internal capacity, but we have some budget, B consultants can be a great tool to help you navigate that process. I'll drop that directory here in the chat as well. Um, when it comes to assessment setup, that is somewhere where we can definitely help you. So if you do have questions still about setup, please reach out to us by logging a ticket or emailing certify@bcorporation.net. And those will really be us on the back end, helping make sure you get the clarity that you need to move through the process. So maybe you're confused about why you were opted into a certain sector. Maybe you've been flagged for a human review and you're still waiting for somebody to reach out to you to do that. Definitely reach out to us and let us know so that we can get you the clarity that you need to set up your account successfully from the get-go.
Thank you. Um, The other question, actually, as we're speaking about setup, I think Brenda brought up. So, as you're filling out setup, or maybe you have already filled out setup, sometimes setup can get locked, and that is a result of uh, if you have a complex organizational structure, you may need to go through manual scoping. So Max, do you want to talk? Do you want me to talk, or do you want to talk about what a company can do in that case?
Yeah, you want to take that one, Stacy? I know you've been helping a lot of companies with their scoping cases recently.
Yes, absolutely. So, if in the case that happens, as Max mentioned, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at Certify at, and we can definitely work with you to either let you know where you are in the queue or try and expedite the process in case you're on a specific timeline. As Max mentioned, we're a small but mighty team. We're kind of wearing a lot of hats. So, you may find that sometimes when your setup is locked, it can take a few weeks to hear it back, as in Brendan's case. So just elevate that to us, and we'll make sure to prioritize that on our end. Um, and then in the meantime, even as your setup is locked, you can still access your B Impact portal and assessment so you can continue working on the back end. Um, you won't be able to see the assessment completely customized because you have to submit setup, as Max mentioned, to have your assessment customized, but you can at least see what types of requirements might be applicable to your company.
Yeah, and then if you do get flagged for review, you would work one-on-one with somebody like me or Stacy, and we'd send you basically an Excel file to gather the exact information about your org structure, how all these entities are related. So if you do get flagged for a human review, also make sure you have that org chart on hand, maybe somebody from your legal counsel or executive team who can support you in making sure you can provide the information we need to get you a clear outcome for your certification journey. Um, Trying to think, was there anything else I was missing? Oh, I also wanted to call out one other tool that I didn't mention. I will share really quick my screen because it's a little hard to access. But if you are looking for a very timely response, I want to get an answer right away about next steps or what to do. If you go to the B Lab US and Canada website, you'll see in the bottom right corner this teeny tiny help button. And what this will give you access to is essentially our B Lab chatbot. So we fed it all of our standards, all of the knowledge base, all the information on our website. So you can reach out to ask it specific questions or clarifications, and it may be able to help you. You can see it'll just need your name and email. And I was asking it some questions about our own standards, like how do I understand this specific sub requirement? So that could be another helpful tool if you're working on tighter deadlines or kind of need an immediate response and want to keep your momentum up. Because, like Stacy mentioned, it can take a few days for us to get back to you if you're logging a ticket or needing some additional support.
And then I know we have only 2 minutes left. I just wanted to elevate Daniela's question around how does the assessment evaluate movements whose primary impact is cultural preservation and intergenerational identity, connecting communities, generations, and countries. That sounds incredible, Daniela. I don't know if you wanted to come off mute and maybe share, is there a for-profit organization behind the movement? And no worries. If you're unable to share now, I can just reach out to you directly and just learn a little bit more about the movement. And absolutely, that's kind of the beauty of B Corps and B Corp certification is that oh, Daniela is looking for a mute button. That is the beauty of B Corp certification is that all businesses are mission oriented and they're really going above and beyond in different areas of business.
Thank you for helping me with that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so and thank you so much for reading the question and for commenting. It is pretty incredible. So what it is, to answer your question, it is currently a company and not an organization. That's where the bigger question mark is. I'm in the process right now of determining. I know I don't want it to be a nonprofit. There is definitely a for-profit element, especially because this is a next generation led mission. And I think as a parent of the next gen, who my child looks to be about your age, I couldn't possibly allow none of you to not be profited for your hard work. So it is definitely a for-profit, and I think a B Corp might possibly be the mid-range option for that. So it's currently a company with a massive mission.
I love that, Danielle. Thank you for coming off to share more about that organization. Um, Yeah, definitely reach out to us. We want to learn more and figure out how we can support you. But to answer your question specifically, the B Corp standards will definitely help you live out that mission and make sure that the policies of that for-profit entity are in alignment with that mission and that vision. And you'll actually see as you're going through and doing certain things in the benchmarking against the standards, some of the mission and the impact of this company's service or product will likely satisfy many of the sub-requirements that you'll need to meet as a B Corp. And then the other ones will really kind of help guide your business as it grows and scales and ensuring that the other policies and structures are in alignment with that mission and vision. So our new standards do look a little different from the old, but we're still trying to make sure that they capture those positive impacts of mission-oriented businesses that are going above and beyond.
Okay, that's remarkable. Thank you. I so appreciate that. And I will definitely reach out. I've taken the email address down, and if you have my email address, which I believe is somewhere in your database at this point, definitely reach out to me. I'd love to speak with somebody.
Perfect. Yes, we'd be happy to. Um, well, I know we're just over time, so I want to thank everyone for coming to our Getting Started webinar today. I'm glad to see that folks are feeling more prepared to make the next step on their B Corp journey and keep that momentum moving forward. Again, regarding next steps and all of the links and resources we talked about today, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a recording of today's session, the deck, and within the deck, you can find all of the hyperlinks and all of the resources that we talked about. But again, if you're still having questions, don't know where to go, y'all know where to find us now. So we're really grateful to have y'all on this B Corp journey, and we're looking forward to supporting y'all as you navigate our standards and using business as a force for good. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day.